Well, good morning. Hi. I forgot what I was going to say, so I was just going to pause for a little bit, but, Hey, let me tell you a story. Thank you. Thank you so much. Last Sunday night, actually, me and my wife were sitting outside watching our kids run around. It was a beautiful Sunday night, actually. And we were chatting about some exciting things going on in our life and then some things that were a little bit scary. And we noticed there's some things that you get excitement mixed in with some fears. I don't know if you've ever had those things in life. You're like, I'm really excited about this, but there's a little bit of worry or concern or some fears going on. I don't know if you guys are aware of what's going on in my life, but there's something big going on. Many of you may not be aware of this, but in just 3 weeks, this church is going to 2 services. Did you hear that yet? Yeah, so that's kind of like a big deal for me. Like, there's a lot of good things. I'm really excited about that, but there's some weight that I feel like I'm carrying for that, And so there was some fear. So we're just talking about our fears. I was saying, honey, what are you worried about? What are you excited about? Is there anyone in the room, it's okay to just admit it, that along with excitement that you're having to go to 2 services, there might be a little bit of like, and a little bit of that. It's okay, be real, be brave. Yeah. Me too. And some of you may be feeling what I was feeling. There were some concerns, some questions that I was having, and so I was sharing this with my wife, and I was saying, if we go to 2 services, then what if I don't get to see some of the people that I get to see now every weekend, right? That's a legitimate concern. I mean, you go to 2 services, you're like, well, I always saw them every Sunday, and now I might not be able to see them. Or maybe you're thinking if we go to 2 services, we might grow bigger, and as we grow bigger, I might not know everyone, and I really like knowing everyone, and it just, might lose some of that hominess. Or we go to 2 services, and it gets so big that it loses what makes River's Edge, which is family-friendly connection, right? A lot of people say River's Edge, they felt like they were welcomed here when they came. And I hope you always feel that way when you come to River's Edge. We say it this way, we value people, and we value people that were strangers become friends, and then friends become family. That's our hope and our goal as you come to River's Edge, that you start out as strangers who are like, who are you? And eventually you're like, oh, it's my Uncle Chase. You don't have to call me that, but that's our hope, is that it becomes that kind of a place for you. And so there's some real fears in there, and there's some real concern, and I think most of those fears and concerns can be alleviated when our leadership is just intentional about making sure River's Edge doesn't change as we provide more opportunities for more people to hear more about Jesus. But I'm sitting there on our deck, and we're talking, and we're worried, and we're scared, and I was like, wait a second. This is not the scariest, riskiest thing I've ever done. Why am I worried about this? Like, to be honest with you guys, many of you may know, about 7 years ago, I moved from Illinois to South Dakota, 9 hours away from all my family and friends, to join a church out there where I only knew one person, the pastor. We moved out to the middle of nowhere. I knew nobody. I had just gotten married. We had just had a kid, and we were just going to move 9 hours away from everything we knew to go be a pastor out in the middle of absolutely nowhereville. And it was risky. Like, it was scary, but I was like, man, we're doing this. Like, God is clearly in this. We're going to go. We're going to do this. And then 5 years ago, I felt God saying, let's do something else. Like, let's move from South Dakota, 12 hours across country to Michigan to be the lead pastor here at River's Edge. And again, it was like scary. It was risky. There was a lot of fear. We didn't know anyone here, like absolutely no one. Didn't even know anyone at all, not naming their names, okay? And so we moved here, and we started doing what we're doing now, and it was risky. It was scary, and there was a lot of fear, but I wasn't afraid. I was like, we got this. God is calling us to this. So I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, why in the world am I scared to go to 2 services? To add one more I only work 1 hour a week, right? Everybody knows that. That is it's a terrible pastor joke, and it's not true. But I've heard that, well, you only work 1 hour a week, so now you get to work 2 hours a week. And so I was like, well, it's a big deal, right? It's not a big deal. And I realized here's what it was. I told my wife, I said, to be completely honest with you, like, those other decisions we made, it was just you and me. I didn't really care. It was just us and our money. I was just risking you. And just to be completely honest, cool, let's do this. If it fails, all right, no big deal. It's just my wife, and our marriage and our money and, all that fun stuff, our friends. But now I feel like we got a staff and we got this whole church, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to 2 services. It's going to be so fun and exciting. It's awesome. And I feel like I'm taking you guys to do this risky thing with us. And my wife did something. Sometimes God speaks through your spouse. I don't know if you know this. Sometimes God speaks through, like all the time in my life, and like he's always talking through her. And so in this moment, she said, hang on one second. She said, I don't know if I would call what we did risky. She said this. She said, what we did was we took steps of faith. Somebody heard. I don't know if what we did was risky. We took steps of faith. And she wasn't trying to preach, but I said, honey, that will preach. And so I'm sitting there, and we're supposed to be in week 13-ish of Romans, right? We've been going through Romans for a long time. It's supposed to close out in the next couple weeks, and we're supposed to be doing Romans. And I'm sitting there on my porch Sunday night, and I said, no, we're not doing Romans this week. And I really felt like God was giving me permission, but not just permission, but direction to take a step of faith and not preach what I'm supposed to be preaching and preach something totally different. So this morning, I want to talk to you a little bit about steps of faith. And I want to talk to us as a church, because I believe going to 2 services is a step of faith that we're going to take out. It's not a risk, it's a step of faith. So as a church, I want to encourage us to do this and learn what does a step of faith look like compared to just a risk. But I also want to speak to some individuals today that maybe you're facing an opportunity that has come before you, and you're wondering, should I step out in faith or not? And what does that look like? Or maybe you're facing an obstacle, like there's an actual difficult situation in front of you, and you're trying to figure out, how do I trust God through this? And maybe today you could just get some encouragement on how to take a step of faith, whether you're facing an obstacle or an opportunity. Opportunity? You ever been to one of those? We have an opportunity before us when it comes to going to 2 services. So that is my goal. Would you be okay if I took a break from Romans for 1 week? I got God's permission. Now I got your permission. I feel wonderful this morning. So we're going to go to the book of Matthew, chapter 14. And we're going to tell a story that many of you, if you've been around church life before, have probably heard. Many of you have probably even heard a message preached on it before. And maybe after today, you're going to be like, the message I heard 2 years ago was way better than this one. But hopefully today, you can walk out here a little bit encouraged and a little bit motivated to maybe take a step or two of faith in the right direction. If you're ready, just say, I'm ready. Okay. Matthew chapter 14 says this. I'm going to give you 3 thoughts today on what a step of faith looks like. Matthew chapter 14 says, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. So I did a little research, a little history to find out what kind of boat. I Googled, what kind of boat were the disciples in with Jesus when he told them in Matthew chapter 14? And it wasn't this that popped up. But Amazon had this for a pretty good deal. And I thought, I'm going to preach in a boat today. Would that be okay? And I honestly thought I was going to sit in the boat the whole time, but then you couldn't see me on the back because I don't know if you noticed, I'm a little short. You're supposed to say, no. I didn't notice. And so I did some work, and then I actually, just so you know, this is not in the notes, but I brought chairs up here to lift the boat up so that I could sit in the boat the whole time so the camera could see me and you guys could all see me. But I got really nervous because if you've ever seen me preach before, I move a lot. And even in the boat, as I'm sitting there, I'm talking, I'm like, this is not safe. Like, this is not okay. And I was afraid I was going to step out the boat and, fall off the stage. So I'm going to stay in the boat for as long as I possibly can. It's probably just till I get done reading this passage. Anyway, so immediately Jesus insisted the disciples get back in the boat. They get back in the boat. After sending them home, he went up to the hills to pray by himself. Night fell when he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from the land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. It's that story. When the disciples saw him on the water, they were terrified. In fear, they cried out, it's a ghost! But Jesus spoke to them once. Don't be afraid. He said, take courage, I am here. Then Peter called to him, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. Jesus said, come. So Peter went over the side of the boat, walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong winds and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed him. You have so little faith, Jesus said. Why did you doubt me? When they climbed back in the boat, the wind stopped. The disciples worshiped him, and they said, you really are the Son of God. So, if you're going to take a step of faith, here's where I think it starts. It starts with finding God in whatever situation you find yourself in. The first thing you got to do is you got to find God in the situation that is before you. See, right at the beginning of the story, we see that who was the person that insisted that they got in the boat? Do you remember? Jesus. Isn't that interesting? Jesus insisted that they got in the boat. Now, I think Jesus is a pretty smart person. Hopefully you do too. And I believe, and this is going to be really weird for me. I have to work on this. All right, I believe that Jesus knew what was coming for the disciples. I believe he insisted that they get in the boat at this time so they could get out into the middle of the water and they could experience the storm. So if Jesus knew what was going on and he knew they were going to go out in the storm, why would he insist that they do that? I think it's important that you realize today that maybe some of you are in the room and you're facing a storm or a time of trouble or an obstacle in your life. I don't know what you're going through, but there's got to be somebody in the room that's like, I feel like I'm in a mess today. I feel like I'm in a storm. And I just want you to know, just to take a side note here for a moment, a side step, and let you understand this. that just because you're in the middle of a trouble or a storm in your life doesn't mean that God is not with you or that God is not aware of what you're going through. It doesn't mean that God is not insisting that you still go down that path. Because Jesus knew what was coming for him, but he said, go ahead, get in the boat. I'm insisting that you get in the boat and go out there knowing what was coming next. And it may be that God has an incredible opportunity for you in the midst of this difficult situation that you may not get to unless you go through the storm, just like the disciples found themselves. Maybe God, he didn't bring the storm, but maybe he's okay with what's happening, and he wants to give you something incredible in the middle of the storm. Now, if you know your Bible or you've heard some stories from the Bible at all before, you'll know that this seems like a little bit of deja vu. And if the disciples were in this boat, and they're out in the middle of the water, and the winds and the strong waves are coming, they should be thinking, hang on a second. Hang on. Not too long ago, we were in this exact same spot. There's a story in chapter 8 of Matthew that says the disciples were out in a boat, and a storm came. Except this time, Jesus was with him. And it says Jesus was down in the bottom of the boat, napping. And the storm comes, and it's so deja vu. The storm comes, and the winds and the waves, and the disciples get scared, and they're terrified, and they go down, and they're like, Jesus, wake up! What are you doing? We're going to die. And Jesus wakes up. My goodness, that's hard to do. Oh. I wear skinny jeans, and don't make it easy on me. Jesus gets up in the boat, and he's like, this is the same thing. Why do you have little faith? What are you guys scared of? And he calms the winds, calms the waves. The storm stops, and they were amazed, it says. They were amazed. So here we go, just 6 chapters later in the book, but not too long after this happens, they find themselves in a boat, on the water, with a storm, and they were terrified again. And so I started thinking, maybe somebody here today is like me that have been through a situation that God has got them through. And God has got them through some difficult things in their life, and they're like, yeah, God can do anything. Praise God, he's so awesome. And then they face another challenge just shortly after that, and they're like, I'm so scared. What am I going to do? Have you ever been there? You ever been like, yeah, man, you know God is so powerful. He got me through that. And now you're facing this. And you're like, well, can he do this? I don't know. They forgot what God had done in their past. And so I feel myself thinking that right now with 2 services, right? Like here we are at 2 services, and I'm looking back and I'm going, wait a second. God took me from Illinois to South Dakota, where I knew nobody. And he took care of that. Financially, that was a bad decision for us, just so you know. Like the church is like, we want you to be full-time. I'm like, yeah, full-time as a pastor, this is awesome. We're going to pay you 1/3 of what a full-time salary is. Okay, we can do this, right? So for the other 1/3, we raise support like a missionary would. And then for the other 1/3, I'm like, I'm going to be a bus driver. Somebody gave me a job. They said, can you drive a bus? I said, no, but I'm sure I figured it out. They're like, do you like kids? I'm like, yeah, right? Kids on a bus? It's easy. If you ever want to know a story, if you're a bus driver, if you've ever been a bus driver, I tried something. This is a side note. It's not my notes. But I tried something. I decided to have there are no rules on the bus. Because I was cool. Yeah, I had like a 6-month-old. That's all I had. So I was like, listen, I tried all the rules that they said. You know, they told them, here's the rules on the bus. You can't walk. You can't hit. You can't. So I was like, kids are smart. Like, it's just a bus. It's not a big a deal. And I didn't have that many. And I said, listen, here's the new rule. There are no rules. And I said, it's going to be fine. I trust you. Do you trust me? I'm cool. I want to be the cool bus driver. There are no rules. All I'm saying is a few days later, there became a lot of rules that we established on the bus. Anyway, point is, I took another job, and it was great. It worked out great, and then things were awesome. And then we took the step to go to Michigan. And again, it was scary. And again, it didn't necessarily make sense. And I don't know why exactly it happened, but God was in it. And it was one of those moments where I was like, man, God has got us to that, and through that, he can take us to the next step. Think about it as a church. You don't know the history of River's Edge, but as a church, this church started with just a group of people that decided, hey, we want to reach the Lansing area, and we want to find a church that anyone and everyone is welcome. So they started a church without a full-time pastor. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. Okay, and then they decided, hey, let's see how many years we can go without hiring a full-time pastor and see what that works like. And so for many years, they went without a full-time pastor. Went from one building to another building. And then they decided, okay, we're finally going to hire someone else. So they hired someone else, and they said, you know what? We're doing some crazy stuff. We're taking steps of faith. Let's do one more thing. Let's buy a building at the same time. That sounds like fun. So the church bought a building. And then after that, a few years later, they're like, oh, yeah, now we got to hire someone else. And they took a risk. I don't know if it's a step of faith or a risk, but they hired a short, bearded, beautiful man. Just saying, my opinion. And that was a step of faith. And then, just a couple years later, we decided as a church that not only we need to hire someone else, And so we decided, well, we went with the short guy. So this time we're going to do a tall, homeschooled guy to make up for all the problems that Chase has had. Let's find a homeschooler in the house and let's bring him in. And so we hired Charlie. Every step of the way. See, if Rivers Edge just would look back over their shoulder, they would see all these moments where God has led them into different situations and different opportunities. And Rivers Edge has taken steps of faith and followed God's call in that. And see that going to 2 services, that's cake. It's nothing. So sometimes you got to look over your shoulder to see what has happened in your past so that you can take steps into your future and know that God can handle it and that God's got them. So here they are on a boat, terrified. I got to go to the next one. And Jesus comes walking on the water. They're freaking out. Winds, waves. Jesus comes out on the water. How many of you think Jesus is coming out to rescue them? Raise your hand. You all think that right now. I know you do. How many of you think that Jesus is coming out to save them from this storm? You guys know the story, but all right. It's not like half of you afraid, like, is this the right answer or the wrong answer? I don't know. Why are you asking so many questions today, Chase? Oh, I like your participation. So, Jesus comes out. I always thought he was coming out to save the day. I always thought he was coming out and being like, Superman, I got this. We're going to save you. We're going to stop the storm. Everything's going to be perfectly fine. But if you look in the book of Mark, which is a different letter written by a different guy, but telling the same story, in Mark chapter 6, check this out. It says, he saw them, talking about Jesus, Mark chapter 6, verse 48. He saw that they were in serious trouble, rowing hard and struggling against the wind and waves. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. Everything seems the same, right? He said, listen to this next line. He intended to go past them. That destroyed everything I ever thought about this story. Wait a second. You're telling me Jesus insisted that they get out in the boat, insisted that they go out at that time, knew they were going into a storm, and then he was intending to go out there and just walk right on by. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. So I started thinking, why? Does that make any sense? Jesus' intention was to walk right on by. What I realized is that Jesus was providing an opportunity for them to experience God in a difficult situation, but they had to be paying attention. They had to be looking for God, and they would find God. If you're looking for God in your situation, you will find him. If you pay attention, God is with you. It says in his word that he will never leave us nor forsake us, that God is with you. You're not going through this storm alone, but you can't be so focused on the winds and the waves and the boat and all the stuff that's going on because you'll miss the fact that Jesus is right there. It says that Jesus was intending to pass them by, but they saw him. And I love this. They said, it's a ghost. I was like, a ghost? That's what you're going with right now? That's the best shot you got. It's a ghost. It would be cooler if they were like, it's a bird. No, it's a plane. No. Jesus. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't have done that. They thought it was a ghost. So at first they messed up. They were like, it's a ghost. But at least they were paying attention, right? At least they're like, what is that out there? Maybe that could help. It's a ghost. And Jesus like, no, it's I. It's me. And then he says this, don't be afraid. See, some of us here today may have an opportunity in front of you, and you may need to take that step of faith. But there's other people in the room today that you feel like you're in the middle of that storm. And it's not an opportunity, it's an obstacle. And you're wondering what to do, and you're feeling all alone. And I would just think that God wants to tell you in this moment that he's there. I think he would say what Jesus would say, hey guys, I'm here. Don't be afraid. You may feel like you're alone. It may be scary. I know it's not easy. I know it's not fun what you're going through, but I am with you. I will never leave you. So Jesus walks out, and they found Jesus in the middle of their situation. And then Peter. Man, words today are not going. Peter speaks up. He says, if it's you, give me a command. In this translation, it says, if it's you, tell me to come. But he's really saying, I want a command. If it's you, give me a command. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Because if you're out there, I'm coming out where you're coming. Like, I want to be where you are. This boat may be comfortable and safe and fun, but I want to be out where Jesus is, even in the middle of the storm. And with one word, Jesus says, come. One command, one word. Peter recognizes Jesus in the middle of the situation. And then he has the faith to actually follow God's call. He found Jesus in the middle of it, but then he says, I'm coming where you're coming. And he followed God's call. If you're going to do this, I want to do it with you, Jesus. And he had faith to get out of the boat. Now, normally in this passage, we like to get on Peter. Like, Peter, come on, man, you didn't have any faith. You started sinking. How many of you ever heard that concept, like Peter just didn't have enough faith? That was the problem with Peter. Peter didn't have enough faith. He started sinking. But did you realize in the story that no other disciple got out of the boat? Have you ever thought about that one? I thought about that. I was like, wait a second. Peter stepped out of the boat. All the other guys are like, Is he gonna go in the boat? Get your phone out, man. He's about to walk on the water, right? No one else got out of the boat. They stayed in the boat because sometimes boats are really comfortable. Like this one. Sometimes it's super comfortable in our boat. I filled up the little air in the middle, so it's like padded right now. It's like an air mattress. So I can sit here a little longer. Can you see me? Yeah. Like, not really? You're short enough as it is, Chase. I'll sit up. Sometimes the boat is comfortable. Sometimes the boat is easy. It's nice. It's familiar. We like the boat. The same way in life, I started thinking about, you know what? To be honest with you, it was easy and comfortable in South Dakota. Just be real for a moment. I moved there, and we had finally settled in. We had spent 5 years there, finally had friends. Our kids were making friends. Work was going well. I knew what I was doing. It was getting easy. I could do it. I could do it well. My wife was settling in. Everything was going really well. We were comfortable. We were doing this thing. It was exciting. We were still serving God. Everything seemed really nice and comfortable and easy. For some reason, we felt God calling us. And we had to step out of the boat. We had to take a step of faith, trusting that if God was in the situation and he was calling us to do something, it was our job to follow his call. One service is comfortable, right? We're doing a pretty good job, right? We can pat ourselves on the back. Things are going okay. Church is fun. It's exciting. We got one service. We know everyone. Everything's going smooth and easy. It would be easier just to stay at one service. Let's just be real. Logistically, it would be a lot easier. It would be comfortable. And we could be a church for a long time, chilling with one service, but we really feel that God has called us to take a step. We really feel that God has been in this, and God has led us to this moment, and as leadership, we want to take a step out of the boat, and we don't want to be like the other disciples that just chilled in the boat. How cool would it have been, though? Let's just be real. Okay, one disciple steps out, whoosh, he starts. Whoosh. The other disciple's like, I want to do that too. And every disciple got out of the boat. And then they walked, and they just kept their eyes focused on Jesus, and they walked all the way to the shoreline. And the people got there like, what is going on? What are you guys doing? Where's your boat? And they're like, we don't need a boat. We got Jesus. That's all you need in life is Jesus. Wouldn't that be awesome? And they're like, no, seriously, where's your boat? And they're like, I don't know, it'll wash up on shore later. I don't know, I think that would be a cooler story. But anyway, that's not what happened, because the rest of the guys were comfortable inside their boat. They're happy there. It's scary to step out the boat, but Peter actually had the faith to step out the boat, and then he got to walk on water. And I love, as you've heard pastors say this before, and I'm just going to steal their line because I think it's a great line, is that for Peter to experience the miracle, he had to get his feet wet first. Right? Like, he had to get his feet wet before he could walk on water. So I'm sure that first step was absolutely terrifying because the storm's still going on. It was absolutely terrifying. I'm sure that first step he was like 3 inches in. Oh, whoa. All right, Jesus, I got it. So he started walking on water. He got to experience a miracle. He first had to get his feet wet. But then it says that all of a sudden, he began to focus on and look at the strong winds and the big waves. And he began to get scared. He took his focus off Jesus and started to focus on the things around him and let those things cause doubt. And then he let his doubt drown his faith out. He let fear drown out his faith. He started to trust in the storm around him instead of trusting in Jesus, who called him out of the boat in the first place. I thought that was interesting. He did something really incredible, and he started to walk, and he had enough faith to take the step. But it's like his faith timed out. See, Jesus said, you have little faith. Remember that line? Peter, why do you have so little faith? And I realized, but Peter had faith, right? He had faith to step out the boat. He had faith to walk on the water. He's the only one that had faith to call out to Jesus, like, if it's you, I'm coming. And what did he mean by you have little faith? So I looked up the word, and it's a Greek word that puts two words together. One of the Greek words means faith. One of the Greek words means little. But this word can also mean not just little as in like he only had a teaspoon of faith and he needed a tablespoon. Not that kind. Or he only had a cup of faith and he needed whatever's bigger than a cup, like a pound. I don't know measurements. Anyway, I don't think it necessarily meant that it was an amount of faith that he was talking about. But it can also mean, this word little can also mean, the Greek word can also mean brief or short in amount of time. And maybe, just maybe, Jesus wasn't saying like you have a little amount of faith, but he was saying your faith was too brief. Because the very next question he says is, why did you doubt me? So he stepped out of the boat, he started walking, but then he doubted. And I think Jesus was trying to tell him, like, why did you doubt? Your faith was just short. Your faith timed out. If you had a little longer faith, if you let it last a little longer, if you focused on the right thing, your faith could have taken you all the way to the shore. I don't think he was saying you don't have faith. I think Peter had faith more than the other disciples in the boat. I just think he allowed his faith to time out. He started stepping, but he didn't keep stepping because he started focusing on the wrong things, the winds and the waves. But I love this. It says, and as Peter began to sink, he cried out for help, and Jesus immediately grabbed him, and they got back in the boat. See, if we're gonna take steps of faith, we need to find God in our situation. Whether it's an obstacle or an opportunity in front of us, we got to look for God. And then when we see God, we got to follow his call. We got to listen to what he says and what he asks us to do, and we got to start stepping. And then as we start taking those steps of faith, we got to keep our eyes focused on Jesus every step of the way. Because it's easy to look around and say, man, this doesn't make sense. This is not what I expected. This isn't really easy. And get distracted and forget who called us to do this in the first place. And forget the why behind what is happening. I want to end with just a few things I really love about Jesus in this story. First, I love that he came to the disciples in the middle of the storm. Now, it says he intended to walk on by, but he was providing an opportunity for them to experience something really awesome. He came to them in their time of need. And I think we can learn something from that today, that no matter what we're going through, maybe this will be the only service you ever hear at River's Edge, and you don't care about 2 services, and you're not worried about it because you didn't even know we were doing it until like 10 minutes ago. But you're going to face a moment in your life where you're worried, and you're fearful, and you're scared, and you're feeling alone. And you know something, that no matter what, Jesus will come to you. He'll be there for you in your time of need. I also love that he provided this incredible opportunity in the midst of a storm. It wasn't just one of those moments where they were doing everything perfect and everything was going right, and then he said, because your faith is so awesome, I'm going to give you a miracle because you did all the right things. It was in the middle of a difficult situation when they weren't trusting God, when they weren't remembering what he had just done a few, maybe weeks or months ago. It was in the middle of a storm that Jesus provided an opportunity for them to experience something incredible. But I also love that Jesus was right there when Peter cried out. It says he started stepping. He looked to his left, looked to his right. He saw the winds, he saw the waves, and he started to sink. And it said he cried out for help. And the next word says immediately, Jesus grabbed him. It wasn't like Jesus was like, I'm coming, hold on. Doggy paddle a moment. He was right there. He was close enough to him that he could immediately grab him. And you may be in a moment in your life where you feel like you're sinking, but I want to encourage you that you're not going to drown. So if you cry out, I believe that Jesus is right there, ready to. And he pulled him back up. They got back in the boat. And then the winds and the waves settled. Church, we're going to step out. I believe in faith, trusting God has called us, and he's in this situation, called us to it. We're going to take steps of faith to go to 2 services. We're going to do it in just 3 weeks. And my hope and my prayer is that it's not just me and the other pastors and the other staff taking steps out of the boat, steps of faith. Like, my hope is the rest of the disciples will get out of the boat. Like, join us in prayer. Like, we need to bathe this thing in prayer. Join us by inviting other people, because we're going to fill 2 services, we need more folks. Join us by finding an opportunity to serve. Join us by just trusting God and following his call and doing what he calls us to do. And I believe you can join us and step out of the boat and take a step of faith, and maybe we'll get to do something incredible like walk on water, or maybe we'll just do 2 services. I don't know. I still think that's incredible. But I just got to end with this. the point of this story was not to talk about Peter's faith. Did you know that? This isn't about, did Peter have great faith or did he have little faith? The purpose of this story is not Peter. It's to point people to who Jesus really is. And maybe you missed it, but at the very end, here's what happened. They get back in the boat. And it says in Matthew chapter 14, they climbed back in the boat, the wind stopped, then the disciples worshiped him. And they said, you really are the Son of God. See, Jesus was showing his power by walking on the water and calming the winds and the waves. He was showing his love by coming out to them in their time of need and by grabbing Peter and pulling him up when he cried out for help. He was showing that he was, and he is, and he will always be the Son of God. And I heard a pastor say that this was the first time that the disciples called him Son of God. This is the first time they recognized that he was the Son of God, that they used that phrase. I thought that was very interesting, that Jesus used this story, not to say, if you have enough faith, you can walk on water and do anything in the world. But this story was told so that we could remember who Jesus is and who he was and who he will always be. He is the Son of God. And he showed his power by coming and taking your place on the cross. And by defeating sin and defeating death. And he showed his love by coming for you. Not because you're worth it, not because you deserve it, but because he loves you. You didn't do anything for it. It's unconditional, undeserved love. And he came for you, and he died for you, and he rose again for you, so that you could have a relationship with him. And I believe that we're not going to two services because of us. See, this message isn't about us. This message is not about going to two services even, and two services isn't about us. Two services is about providing more opportunities for more people to hear more about Jesus, and his love for them, and his power, and what he has for their life. And he wants them, every one of us, to take steps of faith towards him and enjoy this cool thing called life together in a relationship with him. We want to help people remember all that Jesus has done. So today we're going to close our service. We do this occasionally here on a regular basis at River's Edge. We remember what Jesus did through communion. And it's a time for those of us that have put our faith in Christ to remember what he's done for us, to look back and know that he came and he died and he rose again for us. So we have tables set up at the front and one at the back. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to come as you feel led, and you grab the piece of bread and you remember the body that was broken for you. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our sin. It's the punishment that brought us peace. It was upon him, and it says, by his wounds we are healed. So you remember his body broken for you, and you dip it in the juice, and you remember the blood that was shed for you. God's word says that without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sin. But Jesus came and he died for us on the cross. And we remember what he did for us, but we don't just remember his death. We remember that he came back to life. And then you just take a moment to go back to your seat and just spend a moment with Jesus, maybe praying for this church, and as we take a step and do something a little bit different here in just a few weeks. Maybe it's praying for your own life. Maybe there's an opportunity ahead of you that God is calling you to, and you just got to decide, what am I going to do? Is he in this? Is he not in this? I want to take steps towards him, not away from him. Or maybe there's an obstacle you're facing that you just need God's strength to get through. And so just take a moment to pray, and then we're going to end with a worship song. I just want you to think about today. Maybe there's a step of faith that you need to take. And I don't know where you're at, and maybe you still have a lot of questions. But I would encourage you to trust Jesus through it all. I would encourage you to know that if God is in it and he's calling you to it, he can get you through. Let's pray. Lord, we love you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for just the opportunity we have to gather here together, the freedom we have to come together and hear from your word, be encouraged by it. I pray that you would just lead us and that we would all have the faith to follow. Thank you for your son and sending him to die on the cross. Thank you for the resurrection. It's in your name we pray.